I am part of pool of European youth researchers, which is under the Youth Partnership of Council of Europe. And well, for a little bit more. And this is a group of researchers, about 35 of us from different countries working on different issues. And I'm also in the steering group of European Platform on Learning Mobility. And we have been looking at COVID-19 pandemic and its impact for a while. There is a knowledge hub. I put you the link. Here you might find some of our research findings. And at the moment, with a colleague from Poland, I am completing something on a desk study, looking at different studies done by other people on the implications for learning mobility. And as most of the people here, I was told, are working with learning mobility exchanges and international projects, I want to share some of the findings. And I also have, I am part of the RAY network, which 29 countries are part of it, and I will share the findings of the RAY Corona research as well in the link. So if you, I'm not going to use a presentation, but you can find what I'm using here as well. So I will put the link, and you can get the RAY Corona report there with other ones as well. Most of the countries present here are there. Okay. Oh, yes, it's here. Maria also. Maria was faster than me. Thank you. Now, to start with, this is the elephant in the room. I mean, pandemic is affecting the whole society, and it's affecting young people, and it's affecting young people in different ways that we could not have seen. Most of the research in the beginning was descriptive and was focusing on the urgency of situation, because most of us did not have experience researching or working or operating under pandemic conditions. So most of the research initially was in a sense of urgency. They had to do something very quickly, and most of it was descriptive, trying to describe the situation. But more time has passed now. We are able to collect more data and see the changes. So we have more insights at the moment. And to start with, I will compartmentalize my speech under three groups. One is the effect on young people. The second one is on effect on youth organizations, and finally, effect on society. And I will throw 1 or 2 points under each box to stimulate the discussion and to contribute to your project. In terms of young people, effect of young people, one of the first things that, and youth work particularly, in relation with youth work, because Cathy and Michele are going to speak about young people particularly. In terms of youth work and learning mobility, what is very important is we are losing, and we have lost non-formal and informal parts of learning. Yeah. So the urgency, the focus is on formal education. Most of the schools are online. I am teaching in a university as well, and my courses are online. And this is like you zoom in, I speak just like this, and then it's over. But what about the 5 minutes before the teacher comes to the classroom? What about after the class that you go for a walk? What about during the coffee break, talking to this guy that you think is very interesting? So this informal and non-formal learning is gone. And we can't replicate it at the moment with online facilities. I mean, these energizers, these things are nice. European Youth Work Convention is going on. And last night there was the online disco. And for most of us, it felt very weird to have online disco. It's just like this, and imagine people doing this in front of the screen. So it didn't feel right. So this is something, this formal and informal learning. And when we look at impact and competence development of exchanges, it is true that most of the competences are not developed only in sessions, but this 24 hours, 3 days of event, when you're talking with people in the coffee break, when you are going for a walk afternoons. So this is something that is affected, non-formal and informal learning, and how it is going to hinder competence development, we have to see and think. And here, let me put a note, an implication. This is an important task for us, all of us, to unlearn and learn. Because what I mean is that we have a huge experience of learning. In youth work, we have received trainings, we have projects, we know how the dynamics of a group work. We know how to energize people, we know how to give a break, we know how to zoom out. We have learned these over the years. As a moderator and trainer, I can work a room of 40, 50 people, entertain them, but keep them engaged. But am I going to repeat all of them in Zoom? That is a problem. I have to unlearn some of the things, some of the energizers, like Voya was talking about standing up. It's like, how physical do you want to get with digital? So do we have to learn new things? Yes, but we also have to remember we have to unlearn certain things because we can't just replicate it when it's digital. Another issue is the competences, competence development, and in youth work, how is the pandemic affecting it? When you go digital, there are certain competences you don't develop in sessions. I'm talking about, just think about playing in the street. There were very interesting research in the past, how when young people, kids stopped playing in the street, how did it affect their social development, social competences? Think about negotiation. Think about learning to lose. If you're playing in the street and you lose, life is brutal, huh? You cannot save like in PlayStation or other games and continue where you lost. You lose, you lose. And that was a generational research that kids don't play with other kids or don't play in the street. They don't learn how to lose. And learn self skills. Learning about yourself is possible when you're with other people because they are choosing. For instance, you're playing football and nobody chooses you, then you understand you're not very good in football. Or they put you in the goalkeeper. This is my story because I was wearing glasses. So they always made me stand there and hope that the ball will hit my big nose, but they never made me a striker, you know. And this is, I had to accept this fact that, I'm the goalkeeper. So I became a very good goalkeeper, by the way. I was playing until I was 40 years old. I was in the school team, actually. But it wasn't my choice. If you asked, everybody wants to be Ronaldo and nobody wants to be, the goalkeeper. But this is how your colleagues teach you, your peers teach you. And with pandemic, this is hurt. This is something we have to think about, that this development of social competences and social skills. And another issue I will raise, this is not an exclusive list, but there's a lot of topics. These are the three ones I want to say. Economic situation of young people. Lots of young people lost their jobs. Youth unemployment skyrocketed, and most of it was lost in temporary part-time jobs. Make a gesture, reactions, raise your hand or whatever. If you know a young person who had a part-time job and lost it or lost some kind of income, yeah, quite a number. It's very common in Turkey for university students, for instance, to do tutorship, to teach mathematics or English to younger kids. And it's impossible in pandemic. When I was a university student, I did extra pocket money by teaching mathematics to 10, 11-year-old kids, and this is gone. In summer, lots of young people work in seasonal jobs, tourism in Turkey. Again, I used to do that when I was growing up to improve my language and also get some pocket money. And with the death of tourism, a lot of young people in Italy, Spain, Turkey, France lost their jobs in hospitality and tourism business. Now, this is going to have long-term consequences because most of the young people would save money. Ufuk and I come from work camp organizations. Ufuk himself was a participant when I was working there. He would work in the winter. You were selling irons, yeah, to iron the clothes. I remember the story 25 years ago. He would sell irons in winter, save money. So in summer, he could go to work camps and travel. So if you didn't make this money in winter and in summer seasonal jobs, it's going to be a big problem. And final issue, and I think Cathy will speak more about it, is mental well-being. The effect of delayed adulthood, transition to adulthood is a problem we have to think about. All my students in university are stuck at home with their parents. Normally, university is the time where you grow up. If you go to university, not every young person has to go to university, but for the ones who go, this is the time you learn to do your budget, clean your own house, do the shop, take responsibility of your actions. And now I have young people who are 20 years old who had to go back to their hometown and are stuck at home and always on the screen, and they have to do the classes on screen. So there is a concept actually from Africa normally, it's called waithood. And waithood mainly refers to that young people cannot transition into adulthood due to a major crisis. There is a war, there is a natural disaster, whatever, political turmoil. So you cannot transition into adulthood. I wouldn't call as early as now that we are entering a waithood period in Europe, but definitely it affected the plans of young people. Some people wanted to move out of their family by getting a job, they can't. Young people wanted to leave town and move to another town, I don't know, from Siena to Roma, and they can't do it because the times you cannot travel. Most of the young people, for instance, in Turkey, under 20, you can't even go to the street. There is a soft lockdown. Young people under 20 are allowed to go out only from 1 to 4 o'clock. So forget about moving to another city, getting your own flat. You can't even see your girlfriend, boyfriend, partner at that time. So this is affecting them. Now, in terms of youth work, on another topic, but the last one I said, because Cathy is going to speak about it, I'm not going to get into it, but it has effect on mental well-being. There is a group of my colleagues who are working on LGBTQI+, and they were saying that due to lockdowns, some young people who didn't come out yet are gone back to living with their families, and they are very badly affected because at least moving out, they could live their identity in a more open environment, but now they are back with their parents and they are back to all those trauma of 17, 18 years before. Interesting topic, something I wouldn't have guessed, but it is the reality. Next topic is youth work and NEET as well, on the sense, how is the youth work affected? The situation is not good, ladies and gentlemen, for several reasons. But the number one problem I would raise is budget and finances. Most youth organizations, independent youth organizations, had to postpone or cancel their activities for almost 2 years. Think about student exchanges, think about work camps. If you didn't do it, then how are you going to survive? And they can't even benefit from mobility, volunteer input, because young people cannot come and you can't do physical activities. The municipalities are losing a lot of money because shops are closed. They cannot collect taxes. This is going to affect the funding budget issues, which are essential for independent small youth organizations. And what is important is the concept of social capital. This is, in opposed to, you have human capital, the people investing in, you have financial capital, the money, but you also have the social capital. This is your network, this is your reputation. You need help, you pick up the phone, you call somebody, that's your social capital. In Mediterranean countries, in the South, this is a very big treasure. You know someone who knows someone, they help you. Maybe in Denmark, you don't need social capital as much as we need in the South. But organizations also have social capital. If I want to do a project application, it helps me to know this guy that I was in a project together and I trust, so we can apply together. Now, our youth organizations are losing their social capital because if you don't do activities 2-3 years, you lose partners, you lose trust, and people are turnover. About 60% of the youth organizations investigated under RACOR are either losing staff or cutting time of the staff. So experienced people who had the networks are quitting youth work. So how the organizations recover their social capital is a question. And remember, number one source of reaching young people is word of mouth. You know, Anse goes to a project and is very happy. She comes back and she talks to Danielle and says, Danielle, it was very cool. You should also apply. And then this domino effect goes, but the chain is broken now. This year, nobody went to any project. Next year, nobody will most probably go to any project. So 2 years gap might be difficult to recover to recruit. And finally, new forms of exclusion. I want to finish with that. Everybody immediately started talking about digital gap, the people who have the laptop and the people who don't have the laptop, the people who have internet, people who don't have internet. Yes, this is very important. And even in, for instance, private universities in Turkey that people pay expensive tuitions, we could see that people didn't have enough digital infrastructure to do everything online. Haves and have-nots. Even in United States, United Kingdom, people were reporting that university students or even younger ones were going next to free Wi-Fi, cafes, cafeterias, driving with the car in front of a youth center, municipal center or shopping mall so they can catch free internet. Yeah. Now, there is so much about it, and I'm sure you are aware and you're talking about it, but there are other elements of it as well. New forms of exclusion is not only about that. We were joking with Michele before. Just think about this virtual background issue, that you need a very powerful computer that can put those images behind. And my computer wasn't good enough. I couldn't do it. Or think about not only computer and internet, the house you're living in, this turning on the camera. When I teach online, I leave it absolutely optional because the peer pressure, imagine, and some young students say, I don't want my classmates to see my room. I don't want my classmates to see my mother. I don't want my classmates to see, what is on my wall, or I'm connecting from kitchen. I have people taking their phone, putting headphones and sitting in the bathroom. So that's what I also mean learning and unlearning, but it's not only about the device you're connecting, it's where you're connecting from. You are in my house now, you're seeing my books, and young people, most of us, you are still young. They are taking screenshots and looking which books you have in the back. There are new cases of bullying and cyberbullying emerging. Just think about all the cyberbullying and online behavior and etiquette trainings we were doing before pandemic. And with pandemic, we are pretending all those problems are solved because now all of us are online. On the contrary, there was already a fire of cyberbullying. And now everybody going online, we put gas on the fire because now you can't avoid it. You can't simply avoid it. Okay, this is the picture. Rather negative, but it doesn't have to be. By the way, new forms of exclusion, I'm not going to get into the requirements for tests, vaccination. We don't know yet, but maybe in near future, they will say only young people who are vaccinated can participate in this project. It happened in this summer. There were very interesting projects. I wanted to go, but they had lists of countries that were safe and people from those countries can apply. And there were lists of countries that young people from those countries should not apply because the situation in their country is not good. Or if I wanted to go to Germany, coming from Turkey, I had to be quarantined for 2 weeks. If someone coming from Vienna was not guaranteed. So this is a new form of exclusion. Getting a visa for Turkish young people is already very difficult and expensive. Imagine now I have to present not only my mother's birth certificate, my bank accounts, my shoe size, and how many times I've been to dentist. Now I have to present a test that I'm not COVID, or I will have to present a paper that I'm vaccinated. What if I got the Chinese vaccine and I don't know, Belgium says only the European vaccines are allowed? So I don't know about it yet, but I would say let's be prepared in these kind of things. The people who had it in the past and who didn't have it, and these things. But this is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not all grim. Let's not cry. There are other things that are happening. Human societies are resilient, and we have young people particularly immediately learned quicker than youth workers. By the way, this is very classic that young people are faster than youth workers and much faster than researchers. It happens, and then after we study it. But I have a paper coming out from Salto Solidarity. Romina might put the link, not to the paper, it's not out, but to their series of publications. But Solidarity is out there, and we have seen wonderful cases of local solidarity projects initiated by young people. Let's not forget that young people were stigmatized. They were presented in many countries as the part of the problem. They are partying, they are careless, and new form of exclusion. Something for the future I would point out is the relation with local communities. Because in Portugal, for instance, there were national news how Erasmus students were partying and spreading the virus or exploding the virus. So imagine small communities where they're hosting a work camp. There's always this fear that the foreigners are bringing the disease. Look at Austria. The prime minister was on TV saying, oh, it's those people who went to Balkans back home for holidays and they brought back the virus, So immediately this foreign virus, Chinese virus, can turn into new form of exclusion. But on the other hand, young people immediately created local solidarity and took local action. What I'm talking about is shopping for old people who cannot leave their houses, walking dogs, babysitting, because schools are closed. So many single parents have difficulties. And I heard so many cases, neighbors taking care of neighbors' children, babysitting. So young people already immediately showed they are part of the solution. There are lots of examples from different countries. In Turkey, people were paying other people's electricity bills at the time of shutdowns. Yeah. So we have things to learn from young people because they adapted very quickly. They came up with solutions. So we should not only take young people as our unit of analysis, put on the microscope and study, but try to see what we can learn from them. How did they react? They created WhatsApp groups. They were doing Zoom parties without us doing anything. Local solidarity projects, kitchens. In France, lots of young people were making sandwiches at home and distributing it to the homeless people. They took action immediately. So let me finish by saying the famous the thing of Joker effect. It's from biology, and when you have an organism and you introduce a destructive agent in it, the other elements of the organism unite and cooperate to fight this destructive element. That's called Joker effect. Yeah. So I think how we should approach pandemic is not something temporary. It will go away. It is going to create some effects that are here to stay, but it is also the Joker effect. It brought people together, and it created a solidarity and cooperation sense that we can use. So I'm not going to get into new age business management crap about, oh, every crisis is an opportunity. I don't believe is that a crisis is crisis, voila. But how we can come out of it and what we can change and what we have to fight to protect is up to us. And I leave it to you. But what I'm telling you is pandemic will pass, but youth work and young people are here to stay. Their problems are here to stay. And youth work helps. Youth work is really making a difference, and youth work works. So we will not close down the shop. On the contrary, we have to enlarge the shop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ozgehan. I mean, I think that the issues and problems that you were mentioning are that most of us are aware, but then it gives more sense when it comes as a result of a study and research. And I think it also increases our awareness as youth workers, social workers, in how we should, I mean, organize and design our future work.
And it's sorry, it's also important to say that we are not alone. You know, most of the time this is an issue. People are at home depressed and they think they are the only one who's depressed. But the moment you show them that no, everybody is locked at home, it creates a different effect. So I think it's the scale we have to enlarge. That's what I'm trying to do. What you observe is not unique to your local community or youth organization. 70% of the youth organizations in Europe have lost income. So you are not alone.
Yeah, and then also you mentioned that is for youth in these situations, of course, the risks are higher and the results are unfortunately more negative. But then, as you said, like this is, I mean, and your presentation was more general that tackled also some of the issues that Michele and Cathy will be, I mean, also mentioning. So as you already tackled a bit, like the digital youth work and youth in this situation part, as like you started, and now it will be great to continue with Michele to tell us more about the digital youth work and youth in this situation. So how is the relation, how it is affecting our work, and how it is affecting the youth in this situation specifically?
Yes, thank you, Musa, and thank you, Ozge, also because you already entered, as you said, in some aspect that I'm going to cover. So we already have some interesting notes there. I have some slides that I'm using to give you a visual reference and maybe help you to focus on some concept that I'm trying to touch and address. So let me just share the screen so that you can see them. Yes, here they are. And let's start. I guess you can see now the topic I was given, talking about NEET, talking about COVID, and talking about digitalization. It should take 1 month to talk about one of these topics alone, but the 3 of them combined in less than 20 minutes, so couldn't be easier. Oh, perfect. I love to pick up big challenges. But the first challenge I want to pick up is together with you to define this aspect of digitalization, which is basically what's happening on a big scale now, but was already happening since quite a while. So the space that digital tools, spaces, media are taking more and more and more in our everyday life experience. So in order to understand and make a little bit of a common ground about this, I would try to ask you to tell me 3 words about digitalization. Since I know that you are already familiar with the tool, I'm using Mentimeter. So I'm asking you to go on menti.com and use this code 165148 and let me share the browser now so that we can see the results that we are getting, hopefully. Yeah, thank you, Maria, for putting the code number in the chat so it's easier for everybody to retrieve it. 3 words to define what is digitalization in your experience, in your opinion. Yeah. I guess the vote is open already. Can you vote? Yes, yes, yes. Results are starting to come. And you see here some aspects are positive, beyond borders, connecting people, which also was an advertisement of a a phone company back in the days, and they didn't end up so well using this punchline anyway. And then easy access to information, but then on the other side, expensive and
Michele,
technical problems and isolation, yeah, and so on.
Michele, can you please share your screen?
Oh, sorry, yes, sorry. It should be shared, but for some reason it is not. So let me try again.
Yeah.
Now you can see.
Yeah.
Yes? Can you? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Sorry, but I was convinced you were already seeing it. Yeah. As you see, some positive elements and aspects are there for sure, other negative as well. And this is exactly what we are going to discuss. There are possible positive sides of this situation. I'm agreeing with Ozgehan. It's a crisis, it's a crisis. So it's not that we have to be happy because now with Corona, everything will change. With Corona, people are dying, so there's nothing to be happy about. But then we can, as resilient human being, try to rise to the occasion and try to improve our living condition in every moment, including this moment. On the other side, of course, we are facing problems, and digitalization in this special time are adding problems to more problems. Yeah. So new skills, economical, impossibility to reach, virtual, but also very concrete and practical things like electricity, having a connection, it's there, connection at home, keeping distance, computer is the bigger word that you are choosing. We need a device, and it's not mandatory. It hasn't been mandatory so far that everybody should have a device or more devices in houses, neither an internet connection at home, even though we will talk about it later. Okay, I see that words are still coming, but I move forward because the time is also going. So I'm now closing the share and getting back to my presentation slides so that can help us to keep going. Yeah. So the first thing I want to really underline is that we are in a very, very, very uncommon situation. It isn't really an experience that we can say we have had to be in a situation like this. Yeah, the last big epidemic like this big could be the one in the beginning of last century. And so, yeah, we can read about it, but not really having a direct experience of it. So this is the moment where we should really take care of the choices we decide to take, because whatever will happen in these days, in this year, and probably I'm afraid also in the next, that will be history in the making. In the future, in 20, in 50, in 80 years, they will review the choices that we are taking now in this crisis situation, and they will evaluate our choices to see and to say if we were good enough to face the crisis we are in or not. We are really making history, and we are really seeing history in the making. So we really have to be aware of the importance of the steps we are taking now. Also, for that reason, another thing that I want to underline as an opening concept before going deeper is that even more than usually, there is no one-size-fits-all solution in this situation. Especially talking about exclusion, NEET youngsters, being online or not, the diversity of situations is so wide that we really have to be super, super attentive to specific, tailor-made solution to address specific, very, very diverse problem that we have. So yes, it is true that, as you said, there are some possible side effects from this situation. We are going there at the end of my presentation, but I want to start addressing the fact that Houston, we do have a problem here. These numbers are Eurostat numbers regarding the growth of internet access of households. So how much internet is available in houses in Europe and more. You see, there are more countries there. From 1214 to 1219, so last year, of course, there is an increase. We can see that all the red lines are from 5 years ago, and the blue lines are last year numbers, and almost everywhere there is an increase of presence of internet connection in houses. But there is a big but to be underlined. These aren't necessarily broadband connections. The fact that we have internet at home doesn't mean that we have a strong internet connection at home. So for instance, it was good last year to play some online game before lunch or after dinner. But now when you have maybe 3 kids that need to be connected with different schools, you need a very strong connection. You need devices, you need a lot of things that you are not supposed to have. Infrastructure then starts to become a problem. And this is getting immediately political on a level which is not even youth work anymore. It's a bigger frame, much bigger frame. This is a matter of politics in meaning that how a country decides to spend money for their priorities. In my country, Italy, we've been talking for years about, yes, putting more strength into our connectivity infrastructure, and a lot of talk and a lot of convention and a lot of companies created and then closed and then recreated. And then Corona arrived, and then all of a sudden we realized that our infrastructure of connectivity providing internet was not providing enough internet to everybody. Areas of the country were simply cut out. Areas of the country could not reach a decent connection, even paying, that was simply available. The cables was not there. So this is something that now, more than ever, should start to be relevant. How much we should advocate, not only for having fancy youth centers and nice programs and funding for our association, but we should demand that countries' administration, that states, should get back to put the best of their people at the first point. And this is also in, of course, taking care of healthcare system, first of all, but also a lot of other services which are now left behind. You can pay, you can afford, probably if you live in a city, a very strong connection. You cannot pay, and you live in a not well-developed neighborhood or in a rural area, you simply don't get anything, even if you are willing to pay. More access to devices. If you have 3 kids and they have to connect, what do? You need to have 3 computers, you need to have 3 laptops, 3 tablets, 3 phones, and yeah, school can arrange activities in a way that probably they can change and move around the schedules, but this is something that should, again, taken into account. I've seen projects, either municipality project and grassroots organization projects, to share devices, to teach people how to repair their devices and reuse older devices. There are workshops that can be built together with youngsters as well, which is also a way to develop competencies, to try to access devices and get online. But then there is a topic which is completely ignored by most of the people. We don't have the right to repair our own devices. We aren't supposed to open them. Try to open a smartphone and try to fix it when it's broken. Try if you can. It's simply impossible. Well, it's not impossible if you have the right tools and the right knowledge, but for the average people, you simply can't. It's broken, you trash it, you do a new one if you can afford it. If you can't, you don't have a device. Again, another way for being cut out. And when you have a device, you should know how to use it. Digital literacy is becoming a huge, huge, huge topic of exclusion right now. Yeah, Ozgehan was mentioning the increasing of cyberbullying, but there are a lot of other problems related there. And simply, these aren't addressed enough. Also, in a certain amount of time for our fault. Youth workers often are not enough prepared at least to address these kind of topics. And we definitely should. More than ever right now, because all the time that youngsters are spending online is of course affecting this topic. And data protection, which is a super huge topic to bring up. But just imagine that now toys that you gift to younger kids, like 6-year-old kids, are able to collect data and send them to the companies which built and sold the toy itself. Datification of toys is becoming a field of studies now, and it's kind of scary that a kid designed for a 5 or 6 years old toy designed for a 6-year-old kid is able to collect information to profile these people already in that age. These elements are what really should scare us or should concern us at least. And we should focus our activities also and our advocacies also, which is part of the job, I would say. Yesterday in the European Youth Work Convention, we were discussing exactly how much should youth work get political. Well, I'm one of the guys which thinks that we should be a lot, and anyway, a lot more than we are. And then I'm getting something from Ozgehan, which was there already, so look at that. Learn and unlearn. I assure we didn't agree before, but it's there already. I'm not completely agreeing with him when he says that informal and informal is gone. Yeah, definitely it's well less present than before, and when it's present, probably it should be better offered and structured. Myself, I spent 5 years proposing a training course for youth workers called DigiTap, which was exactly about this. How can we do non-formal youth work in digital environment? It was 5 years ago already, and it was completely different, but we are just already trying to address this, which now is crucial. I think that, yes, we have to learn from youngsters and to unlearn, most of all, some attitude that we have to not recognize that digital spaces are spaces for human interaction. Something can happen there. Of course, it's more difficult. Of course, it will not be the same. But it's up to us to design experiences that can bring some value when youngsters are forced to meet there. Then, of course, if they're not forced, we can rather go in the field and play football, so I can be the goalkeeper of the other team because I'm the same experience of you, Ozgehan. But as long as we are forced, at least, to stay here, then this is something that we should try to learn from kids. Also, the attitude of having camera on and off. I was speaking about this in a speech that I gave for Salto Inclusion a few weeks ago. Exactly, we shouldn't demand that people have camera on while being online. We don't know what's behind there. We don't know how comfortable they feel with just showing their faces to people. Maybe it's also cultural, What right do we have to step inside other people's houses? But then, just to try to be a bit positive now, going towards the conclusion, the COVID situation definitely set the clock forward. Someone said that we had a boost in digitalization, which can be counted in years. So what's happening now, what we all learned very quickly and a bit abruptly, should probably have arrived anyway, but maybe in 3 years from now, in 5, someone says in 9 years from now. So it's super compressed and crash course that we all had out of necessity. But something is coming out of this learning. All the tracking and mapping attempt that we are doing could be used, for instance, to better address youngsters in NEET situation. There is a research, I will then show the title later, which is exactly pointing at an experience like this done in Estonia, trying to build up an online system to map when you get in touch with some NEET youngsters and share the information with other youth workers and youth centers so that you can immediately understand who are you getting in touch with, because one of the main aspect of NEET people that really they appear and disappear, and it's difficult to understand which path are they following in their experience. And then one researcher that I really try to follow, which is Sonia Livingstone, working for the London School of Economics, already a few years ago introduced the concept of screen time and screen quality. We are a lot now worried about how much time we're spending and youngsters are spending in front of a screen, which is a problem, of course. But the question we should ask ourselves better is, what's happening during this time? It's a quality time, there's some learning there, there's some relation there, or it's just wasted time. So the proposal in our studies are, let's not map and keep the track only of how much screen time we are using. Let's rather consider what's happening during the time, and even better, let's try to make something relevant happen, we as youth workers, educators, in this time. We can try to build up digital relationship online. Well, here is a group of people connected together, listening to me, probably never heard, probably will never meet. And this is happening in a digital space, and probably could have been quite more difficult to happen before. Let's use like this kind of strange word, before. This is happening more and more, and this is giving all of us more opportunities to do this, to meet people, to listen to people, to learn from people, which probably we would ever have had the chance to meet in presence before. So in this way, probably it is a bit of more inclusive. And all this super huge topic of digital youth work, which has been defined as a word no more than 4 or 5 years ago, and now it's on the mouth of everybody. Digital youth work is never meant to be something happening as exclusive way of working with youngsters. It's a part of a bigger family called youth work, the good old youth work. So what's happening in the digital spaces, it's a side, it's a slice of what's happening everywhere with youngsters. It's a part of the offer. Of course, now it's the most relevant part, but it's a part of the offer. And we should focus always on the aim of our offer. We want to provide safe spaces for kids, for learning, for meeting, for growing. That should be what moves us also when we do stuff online. And of course, there are many more and more other possibilities, but the time is really running. So I want to point out some experiences which could help and support some aspects and some possible categories of NEET youth, or anyway, youngsters in a situation of exclusion. We know that there are different categories. I can address 3 major ones: people which have issues from a personal background, so immigration stories, health issues, family issues, people who have issues coming from low income, which can tend to low education or digital device because I simply cannot afford, as I said, my devices or my connection, and other kind of lower opportunities. I live in a rural area where I don't have connection, for instance, or in a less developed neighborhood, and so on and so on. And as I said in the beginning, there is no one size fits all. So let's try to focus at least on one category, which is this one. This is a category which is now, in my opinion, benefiting of more attempts to be addressed in digital environments and spaces. But of course, what we say can also refer to people with other kind of exclusions. So some studies, some researches, some numbers. And one example, last year in Portugal, methodology for improving NEET youth employment in the ICT labor market. I mean, connecting the dot between who is alone, stranded at home, most of the time probably in front of a laptop, and some skills that you could maybe increase or put at use coming from what you do in front of the laptop. Experiences done in other countries. Finland is very much into this idea of working with youngsters in digital spaces. This is a title from the blog of Verke, the organization in charge of training youth workers of Finland, and not only of Finland, on digital youth work. It's a quote from kids. What difference does it make if we are online or face-to-face in a conversation about different environments where you can do youth work? I don't know if you can see the date up there. It's 9 June 2014. These things have been there since a while already. It's just now we are considering them because they are affecting anybody, and not only some youngster in some small village in the north of Finland that of course have to find a way to connect with others because they are stranded away in the middle of the forest. And more, esports in youth work. Let's use youth centers to connect people using video games. 1st of April 2015. And it's not a joke, even if it's 1st of April. These things were there already and were happening already. And they were just regarded as some, experiments, kind of strange. But probably now they have something to teach us all, or at least our experience we should consider more. The research I was referring to before is just being published in the official form a couple of days ago from the Youth Partnership between Council of Europe and the European Commission, Social Inclusion, Digitalization and Young People, curated by Lana Pasic, which is also a good friend. There's no that much referral in here to NEET youngsters, but for instance, you can find here the example to this experience in Estonia to use digital tools to kind of keep track of when you get in touch with digital youngsters, with NEET youngsters online, and how to spread around this kind of voice. And more, and I'm going to close. This media policy project from the London School of Economics is when first the idea of screen time and screen quality was introduced. It's 2016 already by Sonia Levis and a group. And for more practical and very hand-on ideas, this one, the Game Educator's Handbook 2016, again from Finland, which offers ideas on how to use video games and digital games as tools for learning in youth work. So are there soft skills? Are there competencies? Is there any possible way to boost employability? It's not for sure. As I said in the beginning, we are not so sure now, but we can try, we should try. And then researcher will step in and tell us if we are doing good or not. It's also a field where I would like to see youth workers try to play. And the biggest problem in this field, and the last thing that I want to underline, is how to reach out. Ozgehan was saying before that the #1 way to reach out to youngsters is word of mouth. And of course, there is no word of mouth online, but there are other possible ways. And again, a couple of experiences, one from Turn in Vienna. They made an interesting campaign trying to address very sensitive target group, so youngsters at risk of being radicalized, and they created identities on the social network Instagram, and they made a campaign sending around content through these Instagram accounts. There was a name and surname there, Jamal Al-Khatib, and this account was sending out content to get in touch with these kind of youngsters, and then a very long work of one-to-one chatting, counseling, advising would start to try to prevent the radicalization. And also some friends from Germany, Game Over Hate, they work inside the forum of gamers, which can be a toxic place to visit, if you trust me. And they go there inside the forum, try to put some positive messages, try to keep in touch with people which are struggling to be at ease in the community of gamers, but that community is the only one for some reason they could reach because they're stranded at home, because they are in possible situation of exclusion. So that's the only people they can reach out to, and they find sometimes toxic environments there. So who is going to be there and do some youth work in those places? We should be there. And I think that we should take into account more this part of the picture, which so far until a few years ago were really maybe not so relevant in our opinion, but which are really able to move and get together millions of youngsters worldwide. So I guess we should be there, and I really would like to see some effort for all of us to be there. I'm stopping here. For more, these are my contacts, my blog where I sometimes write about these things, and my email if you want, of course, to ask more, but I guess my time is more than finished, so I'm passing back the floor to Musa.
Thank you very much, Michele. I mean, digitalization had been one of the core subjects had been discussed, I mean, especially by the private sector for the, let's say, last 10 years. And in social work, I think this issue, as you said, you mentioned it quite some years ago. Unfortunately, only during COVID-19, we understood how important it is. I mean, and suddenly we started to design it and start to use it. But on one hand, I mean, it's also in the educational sector. We focus so much sometimes on the technicalities of using the digitalization, but then there was another aspect of like somehow nowadays also you can see with all students, we force them to catch up their lesson. We force them we force the teachers also to somehow be still in time of the lessons. And then even you can see students now, they get some of the lectures in the night, in the evening. So, and then maybe we forget one aspect that is more about the mental health of young people and the mental health of anyone who is using the digitalization. So how well do we use the digitalization, especially in social work, which is more concerned? And for that, I think it will be great also to now to give the floor to Cathy, also to share her perspective when it comes to COVID-19, youth work, youth in these situations from a mental health perspective.
Okay, great stuff. So some of my presentation is actually going to go very close to some of the things that you've just heard from the two previous presentations, but I'll perhaps skip through those a little bit. But I think actually that's been really heartening for me to hear that, because it's made me realize that actually from many different perspectives, we are all seeing the same sorts of issues. I don't come from a youth work background. I come from a mental health background. I worked for many years in the UK NHS with young people. And then in the last 20 odd years, I've done a lot of research around young people with a particular interest in those who are excluded from services, the vulnerable who tend to sit on the edges and often quite overlooked in the big national initiatives for improving mental health. So I'm going to run through, again, sort of main areas are a little bit about the impact of COVID on what's happened to young people who are NEET, some of the research about the impact of the pandemic on young people's mental health. And then I was asked to talk a little bit about what the implications might mean in terms of how we support them going forwards. So again, an awful lot of stuff in a very short presentation, but I hope I give you some big headline messages. You probably all know this, but when I was doing the background, I wanted to think about how many young people are actually talking about. And, you know, this is a significant population. And I think Michele showed some Eurostat figures. I was also looking at their reports to get a feeling of, yeah, how many young people are we actually talking about who may be NEET? And the figures I put at the bottom of this slide from the UK, I think really show you how significant the impact of COVID has been in terms of unemployment, risk of being furloughed or losing their jobs. And in the UK, excuse me, organisations who stopped offering apprenticeships. Now, why do I flag that up? It's because this is the sort of thing that we know will increase the risk of young people having poor mental health. Good employment, prospects, economic independence, all of those things we know are really important. These are a couple of quotes from OECD, which again, I think just for me, put in a nutshell the range of risks that are facing our young people in different ways. So it's hit their education, their employment, their disposable income. The first presentation talked about the whole issue about their opportunities to make a transition into adulthood. And this piece of research at the bottom, which was in the British Journal of Psychiatry earlier this year, one of the things that we are really concerned about in the mental health field is that in comparison to adults, we do see the risk of some really long-term consequences for children and young people. And I'll come back to that. This again, it just sums up why young people may be particularly vulnerable. And again, it's the fact that they may be employed in sectors that have been really hit by the pandemic. So smaller businesses, part-time working, all those things that may make it much more difficult for them to stay in employment. They don't have the financial assets in comparison to a lot of adults. So their risk of falling into poverty within 3 months is very marked. And this quote at the bottom about a lockdown generation comes from a report recently from the UN, where they are talking about the worry that we may have a generation where there will be lasting consequences of the lockdown in terms of their exclusion from the labour market. Obviously, we're talking about children and young people, and you've heard in the previous presentations references to education and learning. The research literature is so clear about the important role of access to education. And it's not just about those formal lessons, it is the informal learning that you've heard people talking about, but it's also the peer support. And certainly in the UK, in our schools, we provide a lot of mental health initiatives and support in schools because we know it's a way of being able to reach young people who may not want to come to a hospital or a clinic, or who can't because it's too far away or the waiting list is too long. So we have a lot of emphasis on trying to deliver mental health and well-being support through schools. So if schools are shut, all of that has been lost. Certainly in terms of access to digital support, we have a lot of concern in the UK about both the quality of what's being offered online and people's problems actually accessing it. And like you've heard from the two previous presenters, what COVID has certainly revealed very clearly to us is we've got major inequalities in young people's access to Wi-Fi, laptops, you name it. And if they're in a very busy, crowded house, where are they going to get the quiet space to be able to go online, even if they can? Then we've had a lot of press and concern about the uncertainty and the stress. We've had not well handled initiatives for trying to maintain our public exams, and we've had exams cancelled, and we've had all sorts of shenanigans with grades being messed around, and we've certainly seen the impact on young people feeling completely demoralized and scared about what this is going to mean. And then the other thing that actually has emerged in the UK, and I'm sure we're not the only country, is school is actually a really important source of food for young people through school meals. And we have had real concerns about food poverty amongst families and young people who have been overstretched, where family finances may be very tight. Again, another one, just summing up really, what does this mean for the impact of mental health? And what has been reported? We have got data coming in that is showing that amongst young people, there are increased rates of stress, particular issues around anxiety, loneliness, and depression. We have a range of services that have been picking up more young people who are coming to them, phoning their helplines, their chat lines, reporting suicidal thoughts and self-harming behaviours, and it's also being reported through our hospital accident and emergency departments. They are seeing more young people coming in. And although the figures are very small, in the first 56 days of lockdown, the real-time monitoring of suicide rates indicated that there were increases amongst children and young people, and that has continued. And then we have these range of other factors that we know are going to impact on young people's health. Sadly, we know that domestic violence goes up. Other pandemics have documented this, and we are seeing the same thing. So we have, people turning up at refuges and again phoning helplines. Young people in transition, because I was thinking about, we're talking about that young adult group. We do not handle the transition between children's and adult services well. This is an international problem. We don't do it well, even when things are normal. And certainly where we've got services that have been very, very reduced because of staff shielding and moving to online, I think there's a real concern about what's happening for those young people in the sort of 18 to 25 age band who may have emerging or serious long-term mental health conditions and are just not going to make that move into adult services. Then obviously we've got young people who will have experienced a bereavement. COVID has, as we all know, caused an enormous surge in deaths, and families have been absolutely devastated by it. And young people will have also had those experiences. And then we also have the young people with chronic illnesses who, because we've had obviously the prioritization in health services to treat COVID, may well have lost out on their other treatments and therapies. Two examples, two quite specific mental health disorders that we know are very prevalent amongst the young person population, and where there is obviously a real link with COVID. One is young people who've got OCD, which is around 4% of those young people seen in mental health services. Now, if you've got obsessions and compulsions that are linked to fears about contamination and things like that, then obviously you're going to have issues around making those behaviors worse. Around 6% of young people with special needs will have been really affected by the pandemic because they often struggle with uncertainty. The special schools, the respite facilities have all been hit. And so you may well have young people who are going to find this whole situation very hard to understand, and where, there are reports of increased rates of self-harming and of young people showing behavior that is just regressing back to earlier childhood because they find the whole situation so stressful. Talking about the internet, and I will come on to the positive sides of this, and we've just had a presentation around digitalization. But I mean, one of the growing concerns in the mental health field is around excessive internet access or compulsive internet use. And for young people who are getting into that, this may actually have made it worse. And we also have concerns about young people with gaming and growing debts as a result of, again, the excessive internet use. And then misinformation, that actually, as young people are reported to be using social media as their main source of news, we've got reports starting to emerge, including this one from OECD, which is a big report looking across all different things to do with the pandemic, where 88% of the misinformation about the pandemic is sourced back to social media. Then just more basic practical things, the loss of safe space, the loss of access to youth services, and you've heard references to the vulnerability of the sector. Certainly again in the UK, we know that those services have risks of being closed because of loss of budget, that they are one of the services sectors that has been really hard hit by the cutbacks to public services, and then also the growing demand that's come about because of the pandemic. And what comes along with that is the higher risks of getting involved with gangs, and we have a lot of concerns about the sexual exploitation and grooming of young people. And then lastly, but very important, we have UNESCO reporting increased rates in cases of racism and discrimination, which again is a particular concern in the mental health field, because not only do we know those are risk factors for mental health, but we also know that our mental health services often struggle to reach young people from minority ethnic groups because of concerns about the cultural competence of those services. So on the positive, across Europe and certainly in the UK, we have seen an absolute plethora of new forms of digital support emerging. A lot of services have moved to delivering online therapies. We have computerized CBT and other types of behavioral therapies. We've got message boards, we've got chat rooms, we've got online counseling services. Often these were things that, again, were working through schools in a moderated way, but they have now taken themselves totally online. They are also often the sources of information that I mentioned earlier about the increased numbers of young people appearing with suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety, and so on. But at least these services seem to be reaching young people, which is a very positive development. We have examples across Europe of practical advice and information that is specifically aimed at young people and families, with ideas about how to deal with lockdown and distancing. And youth volunteering, again, was mentioned in the earlier presentations. We have in the UK NHS volunteers, huge numbers of young people signed up to be involved with that as a way of getting involved. And we have got campaigns of different sizes and localities aimed at trying to canvass young people's views around what does recovery planning look like, what is going to help us to get out of this pandemic situation, what are we going to need going forward. And going back to my earlier slides about the importance of employment opportunities, we are seeing some signs of new initiatives, new ways of delivering work experience virtually, virtual apprenticeships and things like that. Early days, because like, again, we've heard an awful lot of the activity has been much more on crisis management and dealing with the absolute here and now. But there are signs that people are now starting to think about, okay, what next? In terms of the challenge ahead, well, there's going to be a huge backlog of everything in terms of health and social care because of the prioritization on COVID. So we have to be realistic that some of those wait times are going to be long, and how we stay engaged with and support young people, particularly those who are NEET, may well be challenging. Some services will not have survived, and that's going to be difficult. And I think, as we've said, youth services could be badly hit in that, and we may need to think about new ways of those working. Yeah, there's huge staffing shortages, and these were here before the pandemic, but the pandemic probably made it worse. And overall, we're going to have, I think, a challenge in terms of the employment sectors that young people worked in, all those arts and those part-time types of opportunities, the creative industries, all are going to really take a while to get themselves back up and running. So my conclusion is that, yes, this is a challenging context. There are the beginnings of new ways of working and thinking about it. I guess as somebody who's researched in the field for a long time and has always been concerned that young people often get overlooked and play second fiddle to adults, it's going to be really important that we make sure young people, including those with mental health issues, and the staff that work with them, who often get really overlooked, are given due attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cathy. I mean, I think the information and the findings you shared, me personally, I'm still trying to digest because I have never heard of these findings. I mean, because after COVID-19, I mean, still it hasn't been a long time so that we can find a lot of results of researches and to analyze the findings. So this information is really very valuable, and I think it's eye-opener. And I think these are again important information to keep as social workers, youth workers, to be aware. And also the examples, the practices you shared, I mean, they are really amazing. I mean, and it's in such a short time for the countries or organizations who could manage to design these activities. I think it's priceless. It's very important, and these are the activities and examples that we need to take from. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
For all this.
No, you're very welcome. And as I said, I didn't put the references there, but I mean, I'm happy to share those afterwards because there are some really good reports that give obviously a lot more detail that people might want to have a look at. And some of the websites I'm very happy to share as well. So people can actually look at the tools and see if there's things they can use themselves.
Yeah, so will be great also to get, I mean, now to give the floor also to the participants, if they have any questions to any of the speakers. This is the time because I was on Jamboard. I try to also sum up the discussions and the findings on the Jamboard for each of the speakers. So there are no any questions there. So I will be opening the floor now for the questions for Ozgehan, Michele, and Cathy. You can target any of them or three of them at the same time with your questions. And please, if you have any, like if you have your questions, just raise your hands and I will be giving you the floor. Questions, reflections, just feel free.
I have a question, even if I'm
Yes,
officially
sure.
not a participant.
Yes, please.
Just until people are warming up a bit. Cathy, I was also wondering if you have any information or any data or any feelings about the domestic violence that might happen now at home with young people. Because you also, I was very impressed by the connection that you made with the food, and indeed, not going in school, people are losing the connection with the with the meals. But I was also wondering, because I know that for women there the domestic violence increased, and I'm wondering how is the situation for young people, children being stuck at home.
Well, as I say, what we're seeing is more, I mean, again, it's very sad, we've got more young people who've come into care in the UK. So social services have seen a surge of referrals where domestic violence has been a part of the safeguarding issues. So again, the data is starting to emerge, and it was apparently this is something that has been well documented in previous pandemics, that this is something that happens. And I guess, as I say, the data is yet to really be fully analysed to understand what that is, but we have Samaritans and people like that saying they are getting more calls coming in of people reporting domestic violence. We have more people in the refuges where they've been opened, and then we have got more children coming into our public care. So yeah, there's definitely an issue there. I think the other piece of it, and again, it comes back to some of the earlier presentations, there is this whole issue about young women in particular, and about identity issues, and about different views about where they should maybe be taking on caring responsibilities back at home for elderly relatives. There's been a lot of tension around that as well. So again, some of the helplines have been receiving calls saying, there's been real family friction and upset at home because of the whole thing about families feeling that they should be shielding or not. I think somebody mentioned young people being demonized by their behavior. We've certainly seen issues to do with that, and young women being expected to take on caring responsibilities, and again, often ending up with them actually having to leave the family home. So, those interconnections are there, and we know that the impact on young people's mental health is huge. I mean, I haven't talked about it, but we also have got data emerging about the impact on younger children. We're seeing more young children who've got major attachment issues, who are regressing to not being toilet trained, who are showing very clingy, anxious types of behaviors because of the either the discord between their parents, or because they've lost somebody, and therefore, this whole situation has caused enormous distress in those early years. Now, again, we know mental health difficulties in that early age range are a risk factor for longer term difficulties. And if you've got those normal sources of support closed down, you can't go and see your grandparents, you can't go and visit or hug somebody, you can't go into your nursery or your school, it just compounds those difficulties.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, Maria first.
Yeah, I got a question actually for Ozge. Ozge, what do you think? Are we ever going to go back to learning mobility projects we knew before this totally, or is going to be after this we are going to have more of this like a blend learning mobility, or no blended, how is it called? Blended, yeah. I'm just like, yeah, I have a feeling that we will never really actually go back to how it used to be before. At least I think for the work that we do as Salto, I think sorry.
No, it's a legitimate question, and I don't do forecasting, but all the signs indicate no, we will not go back to the same thing. And why should we? As Michele said, we learned so much during this process. Should we forget everything we learned? We learned that we can have 5 prep meetings over Zoom instead of 1 that we all have to fly to Italy and meet. So let's have 4 on Zoom, because all of us know how to use Zoom. So I don't have to say, guys, there is this program Zoom, you have to download. Everybody has it, they learned it. So now we will have 5 prep meetings and only 1 of them will be physical. If someone cannot take a visa and cannot come, we will say, oh, no problem. To that session, he will present through digital things. So we have learned things. Why should we forget what we learned? We will use them. And that's why you said blended. We will not stay digital because we stay digital like this, because the mistake we are doing now is trying to, in the beginning, what we did was try to replicate, especially in formal education, because youth work is better equipped. Like Michele said, we've been discussing online, offline youth work for a long time. But formal education made the mistake trying to do the class, carry the classroom here. Yeah. So instead of meekly speaking 2 hours in the university amphitheater, some professors were speaking 2 hours in front of the screen. Yeah. And no, it doesn't, this is not to replicate it, but this is to develop it. So I think what we have developed, we will keep and find the middle way. Now, the thing for us to be prepared is the 2 other things I would bring issue on the same theme. As Cathy said, there will be more people with mental well-being issues. We have to be prepared. Before this, when we did exchanges, if it happens, it was bad luck that some young person is depressed, chronically depressed, and will not get out of the bed, or third day they would be offended with the game we are doing. We would call it unluck, because we operated on the exceptions that 99.9% of the young people who were coming did not have mental well-being issues. I mean, training of trainers, youth worker trainers, this is was approached as a in case it happens. Now the likelihood is very high. There will be some people who lost parents in the pandemic, or who was in intensive care unit and his lungs are not functioning properly. Yeah, or obsessive compulsive issues have raised, so they might be more picky about where we host them. Just to give an example, you can't put on the program immediately. On the 3rd day, participants will stay with the local family, because some people might say, I don't want to stay with a local family, I'm afraid. And what are we going to do? Call them problem makers or try to understand? So how we do the things, we have to learn and unlearn a little bit, because of the factors I mentioned. So it won't be the same, and this is not a bad thing. It's just we have to be prepared and constantly keep learning. We won't be doing 100 people party maybe immediately for next 2 years, but we will find other ways to have fun.
Yeah, Ozge, I hope the embassies will not be aware that we are able to use Zoom and it works. Otherwise, they will not give us the visas anymore. So
you don't need to go there. You can join with Zoom.
That's exactly what happened. During 2020, this summer, some countries said travel only on absolutely necessary conditions. And a few times they said, why don't you do it in Zoom? This is not classified as a necessary condition. So they already know, Musa, too late.
Yeah, I heard some other answers from the embassies, like how can you marry a person you met 2 months ago? I heard these answers from the embassies. So now it will be strange to hear, like, why don't you use Zoom or Nesty?
You marry on Zoom.
Yeah, no, so I agree. I think things will be different. And I welcome that, actually, because I think some things needed to be given a push, frankly, into a modern way of working. Certainly, if you talk to young people, they will say this is part of their life, being online, and we need to use it positively. What I don't want is it being used, though, as a cheap, quick way of doing things. That's my concern about online therapies and things. Is it needs to be done when it's the right way to do it. And yes, in maybe a slightly different way because it's different face to face. I see this as an opportunity to reach out to a lot of people who will never go near traditional, certainly mental health services, and where we may find different ways of being able to offer them things at times that suit them. But we're going to have to deal with the infrastructure because, as you say, the online stuff is definitely a challenge for some areas of the world. But I think we need to embrace this and be positive. But we also need to be clear about the risks. And that's where we need a proper infrastructure building around that. And that also includes training staff. Because I don't know about your countries, but over here, certainly we have a lot of the workforce who would be, before the pandemic anyway, really reluctant to use online tools. They'd be very worried about the safety of them, feeling that they knew less than the young person that they were perhaps working with, all those sorts of issues. And unfortunately, you know, it takes a long time to build that confidence. So we need to be kind to ourselves as well and realize, a bit like our practice meeting earlier this week, that you know, these things don't always go to plan. So how do we make them work and how do we learn together?
Okay, I'm trying to see first. I see Ufuk and Voyi, but I want to see if there is any question from the participants first. If you have a question, you can use the reactions. Adem, do you? Adem, do you raise your hand or? Yeah,
no microphone.
Unmute your. Huh? Okay. Any question? Okay, not from the participants. So I'm going back to Ufuk and then Voya.
Well, that are just all of them are actually like complementing each other. Especially there was the problem that the teachers, especially in the formal education, was not that digitally literate. But the kids are. So that's one of the clashes that teachers feel very uncomfortable in front of like kids of like 10, 11 can use all these digital tools crazily. That was one of the, but what I saw is quite, from the beginning, the teachers and the education policy, they just really get panicked. How we gonna teach these kids instead of thinking about how we gonna make these kids comfortable and relaxed, that they have to stay at home. So it's an extreme condition. From my perception, nobody cares about the education. Nobody cares what kind of a grade they're gonna get, but they want to be healthy. First, saved from the virus. Second, healthy at home. And I was talking with some of the officials in the Ministry of Education. I said, this is an opportunity. Why don't you work on self-directed learning competences instead of trying to push kids to learn mathematics on Zoom? Just try to push them that they can learn things by themselves, but providing methods, alternatives, roads. What I'm asking question is about homeschooling, because what I get information from US, who adapted very much better than other countries, because homeschooling is quite common. And as it's integrating in the education system, it's somehow very well guided through internet, that they have all the documents, they have papers, they have resources, even they can make the exams at home. And so how do you think if this self-directed learning and homeschooling, I'm just asking for, of course, formal education, because it's a bit more dramatic for the situation, help the process in mental health also, but also in terms of like learning processes for young people. For sure, it never replace this peer touching. That's even having a fight in the school teach many things in the so like a learning part. Not good, but it's a part of the life. But like how do you think that should be integrated to each other, not replacing, but
If I might.
I think we lost you.
Michele?
you lost me?
Yes.
Yeah, you lost the end of your sentence, I guess.
That was not that important. It's fine.
Well, I wanted just to make your point, adding a few notes. Meanwhile, I see Ozgehan is putting.
Michele, the voice is not very clear.
Ah, sorry.
Yeah.
Now you can hear me better?
Yeah, better, much
Okay. I was saying that I want to add some notes. Meanwhile, I see that Ozgehan is putting link regarding the Matthew effects. So have a look there, because that's relevant as well. It's basically in a situation like this, the effect of education as the great equalizer, as someone said, it's losing its grip. So we maybe pretend, but we believe that education is what makes everybody equal in the end. No? But without proper education, rich get richer, poor get poorer, and so on. We don't tackle inequalities. That's the point. So, for instance, in your example, I see the potential, and the reason why probably I ended up working in non-formal sector instead of in school. In youth work, we should and we can learn from our youngsters, and we have the possibility to react and put in practice new practices, normally much quicker than formal education system, even though because they are in a bigger structure and so on. So you're right when you say that teachers are trying to replicate, as also Ozgehan was mentioning, but probably because they are clueless, some of them at least, and they are not in the mindset to get some learning from their very students. But we can. I mean, that's what we have been doing forever in youth work. Is this thing interesting you? Let's do it. How is this new thing that you are all talking about? Let me see. For some reason, instead, when getting to the digital environment, it's kind of scary. Oh, but yeah, I cannot learn this. I'm old, I'm not good. Yeah, but what about being not good? If you are a non-formal educator, and some kid would react to a proposal that you give them, but I'm not able. Well, you would answer, well, let's learn together. And how can then your answer, your own answer as a youth worker be, but I'm not able? You can learn. Of course you can, and you should. And you should learn from your youngsters. That's a valuable resource in this time. And you can engage them, and you can motivate them, and you can empower them in putting them into this role of teaching you. But it's not because there's this silly story going around for too much time about digital natives, which simply do not exist. No? It's not that simply being born at this time, kids are born learned already. It's nothing like this. For learning, you have to use your brain and your experience and so on. But they're probably more confident in trying than we are. And since they have more experience in trying, they can bring to the table this more experience. And we probably should be the one helping them to arrange and shape this experience, asking the right questions, which is what we do as adults before them even getting to be educated. And there we can learn. And probably this process is way smoother and easier to happen in non-formal education and in report. So why we don't take advantage of our position once in a while? And maybe we can even teach to the formal system to react and how to react to the situation. I see Ozgehan is raising the finger.
Thank you very much, Michele. Last, I'm going to ask the participants if they have one more question I can get. If not, okay, Daniel.
Well, it's not a question, it's more a reaction about Ufuk comment. When he said that maybe teachers don't know how to deal with this, but children know how to do it. I'm really afraid that we are thinking that, but that is not real. This digital native generation is not the reality that I have around me. So when we started in Spain, the change was like big drama because we had like a normal life, and one day we realized that next day everything changed totally, 100%. So children didn't know what is an email and how to use it. They didn't know how to create a PDF to send some tasks to the teacher. They didn't know how to use Zoom or other programs. So it's like we think that the young people or children, they know how to do things, but actually they don't. They learn some things because they want and they want to use a game or they want to make videos, and they are great with that because they learn it because it's their interest. But we cannot assume that all of them have the capacity to work online because it's not real. And then we can add everything that you were sharing, like not everyone has the devices, the connection, the possibility to have that device in the timetable because there are 5 brothers and sisters in the house and there is one computer and 5 of them, they have the lesson at the same time. How to deal with that? This is a different topic that we were talking, but is that we assume that the new generations, they already know how to use all the technology, and that is really far from the reality that we discover, at least here. So I'm really afraid that sometimes we assume, we give for granted that this is like that, and we are not paying attention that we need to teach them, that we need to work and to learn together, as Michele was saying, that it's okay, but we need to know that they don't know how to do it also. So, and I'm afraid that a lot of people is assuming that young people know, they know how to, because they are used to spend the whole day with the phone, but they know how to do a perfect Instagram picture, not how to send an email with a PDF or a present, I don't know.
Exactly. But like, especially with this offline and online track, it's nowadays everybody wants Zoom. Everybody wants everybody to be online at the same time, but never really focusing on some offline content that you give a research task to the student can do anytime he or she is available. Because sometimes some internet is very low in some time periods in Turkey. Or as you said, 5 kids maybe sharing no computer. Maybe they have to use the one on the neighbor. It's exactly true.
So I want to give I mean, there are also interesting questions and answers on the chat box. So please go and visit time to time. I would like to give the floor to Maya for her question.
It's not a question, it's also a reaction actually about the kids with learning disabilities and also handicapped kids. Actually, it's really important to include them too in the youth work. And in these realities, not so much kids actually know how to use all these really digital, tools and all this kind of stuff. So we need to think more widely, not just about the kids who can learn really easily, but also for the kids with dyslexia and different kind of autism, spectrum, and all kind of other things. Actually, what is really important, because I have a connection with this kind of kids too, and I guess they are more excluded than the normal kids who can really easily use everything what they can imagine and learn really fast. So yeah.
Thank you, Maya, for your comment.
I saw that someone raised hand in the platform before. I don't remember who was.
Voya maybe, but he.
Ornella.
Yeah, it's fine.
Exactly.
Good answer.
Ornella Musam.
Okay. Ornella.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I can't see her.
Ornella, unmute yourself, please. We cannot hear you. You're still, yeah.
Yes, I just want to share my thoughts about distant teaching as a teacher, an English teacher in an upper secondary school. First of all, I want to point out that SEN students are granted access to school. So if their family agree under an agreement between families and school, they can have face-to-face lessons in order to reduce their exclusion. At the moment, there are 6 students attending school in my school. As for distant teaching, I can say that after the first difficulties we faced last March, now I can say that the impact was have 14, 18 year students. So they can use digital devices quite well. And they seem quite enthusiastic about distant teaching because they feel safe at home and don't have problems in using digital devices. Apart from this, we are using the Google Classroom. That is really a huge platform. Students can attend online lessons every day from 8 o'clock. And we can create online resources, create classrooms with Google Forms, quizzes, and others. The only thing we did is to reduce online the time of online lessons through the integrated didactics. That is a blended teaching with, for example, 20 hours of online lessons and 12 hours of offline lessons, in order to reduce the time, the students' time in attending lessons. So our timetable is 32 hours. At the moment, students attend for 20 hours, and the other 12 hours they can view our lessons, the lessons we upload when we are offline in any time of the week. So I can say that the impact is in particular.
Okay, Ornella, thank you very much for your sharing.
Yes.